The rifle wouldn't speak when it had to. The rope line bowed, signs bobbing a chant rolling like thunder under a tin roof. Major Haskell barked, "Keep the senator safe!" and 3 deputies spread their arms like doorframes. A young guardsman brought the M16A4 high blank adapter screwed on tight, and the bolt stalled open with a spent case snarling the ejection port, a stovepipe at the worst second. My father's voice cut clean through the noise. "She'll only make it worse." I didn't answer him. I stepped into the pocket the crowd had left. Around fear dropped, the magazine. Locked, the bolt, thumbed the case free, racked, tapped the forward assist, muzzle. High, safe sky, one controlled bang, a blank per plan, and the sound hit the grandstand like a gavel. The wave of bodies froze, mouths shut. Someone's sign stopped shaking. My father's face went pale the way steel does in shade. I wiped my fingers on a red rag that smelled like solvent and peppermint and looked at him the way you look at a gate you've opened 1,000 times, finally swinging easy on the hinge. A week earlier, Lancaster wore the same march it always does. Wet cardboard smell. Kroger lot shining like a pond, my old F-150's dash cracked into the shape of counties. I took my usual booth at Bob Evans. Phyllis poured coffee like she trusted gravity. Set down eggs, asked how drill went. "Same book," I said. "New pages." Dad's shop sits back from Route 33, a cinder block box, the color of chewed gum, Lawson Auto and Locksmith Est. 79. Inside pegboard key. Blanks, jars of bolts, a radio that believes in classic rock, and my father, Earl Lawson, wiping a crescent wrench with the red rag. He's been training to be a flag his whole life. He calls lists paperwork and paperwork excuses, and he loves me like a problem he knows he can fix if I'd quit moving. "I hear politics are coming to the fair," he said, without hello. "Senator Whitaker town hall cameras." "Sheriff Decker asked the guard for help," I said. "Crowd management, first aid tents, and a stop sound if we need to settle things without anybody pushing." "Stop sound," he repeated the way some men pronounce a new tool like it's a trick. "What you know about crowds?" "Same as engines," I said. "They calm down when the steps are right." He squinted. "Crowds need men who can stand tall, not notebooks." I let that one land and die. Arguing is a leak you never fix. At the courthouse basement, 2 days later, the planning table held a county's worth of worry paper maps with highlighter arteries, ingress arrows, med tent, water station, PAQs. A lonely box of church cookies with a handwritten "Take 2" sign. Sheriff Decker, thick-shouldered and careful, tapped the map with a pencil. "We build lanes and we keep lanes," he said. "If chant turns shove, we buy time without breaking bones." Major John Haskell wore his field jacket like he'd never taken it off. He nodded at me. "Lawson's our small arms brain," he told the room. "Armorer safety instructor. Public event means blanks only. If we need a signal to freeze motion, we use one controlled blank muzzle. High backdrop confirmed on my say-so. No cowboy stuff." I checked adapters, spare blank magazines, a harmless blue gun for demonstrations, and the little roll of bright tape I used to mark who's done a safety brief. I wrote, "Stop sound 1 blank on command" on the whiteboard, because rooms remember better when ink helps. VFW Commander Ruth McCready stuck her head in coffee in one hand, a stack of "Thank You Veterans" stickers in the other. "I've seen folks listen to 1 good bang more than 10 good sermons," she said. "Make it count." Back at the shop that afternoon, I changed the latch on Mrs. Pennington's church van, while Dad explained to no one in particular how politics worked when men had spines. "You going to stand there with a clipboard and save a senator?" he asked. "Stand there with a plan," I said. "And tools." "What tools save a crowd?" he said. "Hands that don't shake," I said, "and a blank when a blank says stop." He shook his head like the word blank offended physics. "Paper bullets," he muttered, and put the wrench down hard enough to make the socket tray complain. "Hollis." My old mentor called that night from his porch crickets a ball game low. "Got your note," he said. "Public guns make private mistakes. You name the jam and the fix before your boot hits gravel. Stovepipe double feed failure to extract. Immediate action first. If it needs remedial, do it like the book is watching. The book's always watching, I said. The book's got on a range, he said, and I could hear his smile. You keeping your rag peppermint now. Always, I said. Thursday. I ran a safety hour for sheriff's volunteers and a couple of deputies who didn't want to admit they were curious. We talked safe direction, blank adapters, what a controlled stop sound is and isn't. We don't point things at people we want to keep, I said. We don't make noise unless it buys time. We buy time without hurting people. If you don't know, ask. A young deputy with a buzz cut asked, "What if the rifle jams when you need it?" Then we show the crowd how adults fix a problem, I said, and walk them through muscle memory. Mag out, lock bolt, clear casing, rack, forward assist, confirm adapter tight, muzzle high, breathe. If Haskell says bang, we bang. If he doesn't, we don't. The room nodded because steps make a room feel bigger. Friday evening, the fairgrounds looked like an idea, half-built sawhorses. Rope lines a stage that would be a stage once the microphones quit squealing. Church ladies measured where pies would sit. A PTA dad in a school hoodie carried water cases like pennants. The VFW tent already smelled like coffee that had done a shift. I walked the space with Haskell and Decker and said out loud what my hands would want to do later the way you do with any machine you plan to touch under pressure. You nervous? Decker asked. I like knowing where the exits are, I said. Good answer, he said. I like folks who count doors. Saturday morning, Dad watched me load gear into the F-150, my green notebook, a spare blank mag, marked with a blue stripe zip ties, tape the red rag that turned into a habit when Mom used to leave peppermint gum in the shop drawer. He didn't offer help. He offered a story. When Senator McKee came in, 97, he said we had men, not manuals. You also had 3 sprained wrists and a busted camera, I said. We're building a smaller story. He smirked. You going to tell me next that paperwork keeps the rain off? It keeps a promise, I said, when people are scared. He made a face like he'd bitten a lemon and waved me off with a rag. At the gate, a volunteer gave me a wristband and a staff lanyard that smelled like a plastic store. The sun bothered the clouds, but didn't win. Protesters arrived with their signs and a woman with a bullhorn that squeaked when she got excited. Supporters wore hats and hope. Kids leaned on the rope and asked if anybody famous was coming. I said the pie was famous. We ran the safety brief with the guard team twice, because twice makes better habits than once. I watched hands more than faces. Hands tell you if a man's angry or just loud. Haskell pulled me aside before the senator's motorcade turned off the main. If it goes sideways, he said, I'll call the shot. If a rifle hiccups, fix what you can see and don't make it theater. Not my style, I said. He smiled. I know. The first chant hit like weather. The rope line bowed. Deputies did the door frame thing. A young specialist brought the M16A4 high to execute the plan we had written on the whiteboard and practiced with blanks and tape and quiet. The casing stuck its tongue at him in the ejection port, spent and stubborn, and for half a breath the whole county tried to decide if it was allowed to be afraid. I heard my father's voice rise, clean and hot. She'll only make it worse. I stepped forward anyway. People think the big moment makes you. It doesn't. The little ones do the ones no one films. The guard taught me that on cold ranges, where breath shows, and in motor pools that smell like oil and old promises. I didn't wake up calm with a crowd in my ears. I learned it a piece at a time from men and women who made me write things down, even when I thought I'd remember. We drilled at Ravenna in January once. The wind came straight out of a bad idea and pushed through our coats like we'd left doors open. Sergeant Hollis stood with his thumb in a pocket and said the line he always said, "The book doesn't care if you're tired." Then he made us do the dull work checks before anything fun. People think the work is the bang. It isn't. The work is the part that keeps the bang honest. Out there, I learned the names of mistakes so I wouldn't hide them in generalities. Stoppages weren't it jammed. They were what they were, and your hands learned to tell the difference. Not to be a hero, to be safe. We treated every barrel like it loved gravity more than people. We kept muzzles where the world could forgive us just in case. Hollis had that scar over his eyebrow, a white tilled row on tanned dirt. He never told the story. "You don't have to make your own scars," he'd say, tapping my notebook. "You can rent mine." He meant, read the log, learn, before the lesson costs skin. Back home, I put those habits in places where folks think you can wing it. I run my green notebook like a cook runs a recipe card. When a deputy asked last year why I over-explained blanks at a fall festival, I held up a sheet with 3 boxes drawn in thick pen, safe direction command stop sound. He laughed, then stopped when a kid ducked under the rope to touch what he shouldn't. After he asked for a copy of the boxes, people make fun of the plan until the plan is the only calm voice left. Dad never liked the notebook. He likes feel grease under nails, a crescent wrench, turning a stubborn bolt, a door that opens, because a man leaned his shoulder into it. We speak different dialects of the same language. He taught me to listen to engines with the radio off. The guard taught me to prove what I heard. I live in the overlap. 2 days after the courthouse meeting, I ran another safety hour in the high school gym for volunteers with staff lanyards and nervous smiles. We used blue guns and orange chamber flags because props settle stomachs. "This is public," I said. "Public means we do our thinking out loud. Safe direction is boring good. Boring is how you go home." They nodded and asked good, ordinary questions. Where do we stand? What if someone shouts fire when there isn't one who calls it off? We put tape on the floor and made lanes you could see. People calm down when tape tells them where to put their feet. After the session, Sheriff Decker stacked cones with me. "Your dad came by the office," he said, like the weather report. "Let me guess," I said. "He offered opinions." "He offered history," Decker said kindly. "Said in '97 they handled a visit with spit and a prayer." "They also cracked a man's wrist by accident," I said. "I was 12. He told that part like the weather, too." Decker scratched his jaw. "We're aiming lower this time. Lower is good." That night at Lawson Auto, I caught a whiff of burnt coffee and found the pot had given up. Dad was cutting a new key for a farm guy with a hat that had seen every rain since Reagan. The grinder whined. Brass filings glittered on the bench like cheap confetti. Dad handed the man a key and a story about how the county used to run on handshakes. The man pocketed the key and gave me a quick side smile on the way out, like he knew a daughter's patience when he saw it. "You teaching boys how to hold toys?" now Dad said when the bell over the door went quiet. "Teaching grown-ups how not to point things at people," I said. "You want coffee that doesn't taste like a tire." "Coffee's coffee," he said, and lifted the pot in challenge before setting it down with a face. "Maybe." I washed the carafe and rebuilt the filter basket, because paper clogs make the whole day taste wrong. He watched like I was overcomplicating water and heat. "You Army types don't know when to stop fixing," he said. "We know when to start," I said, and he snorted, like the word start offended him. He wiped his crescent wrench with the red rag. "Crowds want a man up front," he said. "Someone who looks like he's ready to shove back if he has to." "Crowds want a plan," I said, "in gentle hands." He set the wrench down harder than he meant to, and the tray chimed. "You going to keep telling me gentle fixes, riots?" "I'm going to keep telling you a good plan keeps us from needing a shove," I said. He shook his head, but he didn't have a new line. He went back to his sockets, rearranging order like making rows could make peace. At my place, I pulled Mom's old range log from a box I hadn't opened since she died. I could see her in the margins, her tidy slanted print, write it down. Don't guess? Tired. She used to tape peppermint gum to the inside of the tool drawer, said it made the shop smell like people cared about each other. I started carrying peppermint in my rag after she left, because grief needs a ritual, and mine was small. Hollis texted me a picture from his porch, the sky the color of a steel pan, his boot toes up on the railing. "Weather's going to make folks jumpy tomorrow. Plan your voice." I knew what he meant. The voice you use at the start is the one people remember when it gets hot. Morning of the event, I rode the perimeter one more time with Haskell and a young specialist who kept checking his watch like time might back out. We checked adapters again, because again is where safety is. We talked the quiet language of if this, then that. We assigned which deputy holds the bullhorn and which one hands out water to people who think thirst is anger. Haskell looked at the rope line like a mechanic looks at a belt that won't last winter and said, "We'll replace it with calm." Across the grounds, Earl had found a group of local boosters and was explaining to them how a firm chin fixed most situations. "You don't give folks a lot of choices," he said. "You give them one good one and you stand there." He never learned that you can stand without pushing. Mom could have told him, but she wasn't here to balance him out. I ducked into the VFW tent where Commander Ruth had laid out styrofoam cups, encouraged by the pot. "You're the calm one," she said, patting my sleeve. "Good. Calm is a tool." "Not on a pegboard," I said. "On a face," she said. "Same thing." I checked the med station bandages stacked water cold. I asked a church lady to swap the lemonade cooler to the shade because hot sugar turns people sour. She laughed at the rhyme and did it anyway. The first bus of supporters rolled in with baseball caps and lawn chairs. Protesters came on foot signs, tucked under arms like folded ideas. A guy in a faded marine ball cap nodded at me without smiling. A school custodian I knew from snow days waved and said, "Keep it boring, sweetheart." I said I'd try. I walked the weapons check again, said the same words in the same order because repetition is kindness. The young guardsman assigned to the stop sound position swallowed hard and then steadied when I had him dry run breathing. "You don't save the county," I told him. "You just do the step in order." "Copy," he said, and I heard his voice drop half an octave into the part of himself that could be trusted. By mid-afternoon, the air had the wire-tight feel that comes before a summer storm, except the sky stayed stubborn and the storm was people. We were ready not because we were brave, but because we had agreed on what to do. That's all training is, agreeing before trouble arrives. Dad drifted up to the rope line like a man who wants to be in the photo without buying a ticket. He looked at my staff lanyard and my notebook and shook his head like I'd brought a spatula to a barn fire. He didn't see the point of a plan you couldn't hold. He wouldn't until he had to. He didn't have to wait long. By noon, the fairgrounds looked like somebody had poured a town out of a bucket and told it to behave. The stage crew fought the PA with the same patience I use on a stubborn bolt. "Check, check," the speakers said like they were trying on their own name. Kettle corn sweetened the diesel air. Cardboard signs smelled like permanent marker and hope. Sunscreen coffee dust. If you stood still, the day settled on your shoulders and waited to see what you'd do next. Sheriff Decker ran his show from a folding table under a pop-up. Maps, clipboards, cones. A church lady. Pearl kept refilling the water cooler and telling everyone to quit pretending thirst was character. Decker tapped the plan with 2 fingers, ingress on the south gate, egress on the west med station behind the grandstand, panic points circled in orange. "We'll keep lanes," he said. "Every lane means a choice. Choices make tempers smaller." Major Haskell gathered our guard team in the shade. He wore the same jacket, like Calm had a uniform. "Blanks only adapters, tight blue-taped mags in your left cargo," he said. "One controlled stop sound on my call if we have to reset motion muzzle, high safe backdrop. If you haven't touched a blank adapter today, you haven't touched a blank adapter." He made us all put hands on the little steel tube and say tight out loud, like we were blessing it. He pointed at me. "Lawson runs the weapons check station and the teaching voice. Deputies with questions go to her. Volunteers with nerves go to her. Crowds read faces. Give them one they can trust." I nodded and held up the green notebook so the room could relax. The young specialist assigned to the shot position met my eyes the way a kid meets a diving board. He knew he could do it. He just wanted the pool to be kinder. "Breathe," I said. "You're not saving the county. You're doing a step." The town arrived by the pickup truck and the stroller. PTA moms in school colors, VFW guys in ball caps with ship names stitched above the brim. A retired mill worker in a faded flannel told me the mill might reopen, then shook his head at his own sentence. Protesters came with their kids, and their lines practiced just enough to sound like truth. Someone tested a bullhorn that squeaked like a toy mouse. The grandstand creaked as folks chose seats the way they choose church pews, habit first. Pearl handed me a cup of water and a warning. "You can feel it, can't you?" she said, like a thunderstorm that changed its mind. "Storms don't ask," I said. Crowds don't either, she said. But they'll listen if you feed them and point. I taped 2 pieces of bright gaffer tape at my feet where I wanted deputies to stand during noise. One labeled bullhorn, one water, because people who are told where to go there faster. We walked the what if, again if the rope sags, hands to posts. If a kid slips under kneel and smile palms up. If somebody starts a chant with teeth in it, the bullhorn starts a song we pick to be boring and bouncy. Take me out to the ball game. Songs turn corners better than arguments. Past the rope, Dad had somehow acquired a volunteer lanyard in a cluster of men who treat Saturdays like meetings they didn't have to schedule. He carried the red rag like a rank badge. Back in '97, he was telling a banker, I recognized we didn't have plastic ropes and committees. We had 3 men up front and a message mind yourself. He tilted his chin toward me like I was the weather you check and then complain about. Now it's notebooks and girls with whistles. Commander Ruth from the VFW, neat as a pin and twice as sharp, planted herself beside him with 2 styrofoam cups and the kind of smile that had gotten 1,000 teenagers to pick up litter after Memorial Day. You try the coffee yet, Earl, she asked. It'll put hair on your pride. He harumphed. She winked at me when he wasn't looking. Sheriff Decker stopped by to check our radio checks. Channel 3 is, everyone come here. Channel 4 is everyone else go there. He said, not joking. If someone yells fire, we call it smoke, so we don't grow it with our mouths. He leaned closer. What's the stop sound phrase today if we need it? I don't want to say shoot on a hot mic. Freeze the line, 1 pop heads high, I said. Then you on the bullhorn, hold, breathe. Back away to the tape. Then Pearl hands out water, like it's communion. He grinned. I like a layered plan. Makes fools trip on the lace. At the weapons check station, we ran our hands over gear for the 17th time and told the story again. Blanks only Chambers checked muzzles in love with sky. I watched forearms tattoos, scars a line of grease you can't scrub out of a life. The specialist's hands shook less each pass. You got a coin, I asked. He dug out a quarter. When it's time, put the quarter in your offhand. Feel it. That way, you remember you've got another hand to use and you won't try to save the world with your thumb. He laughed, surprised. Sergeant Hollis teach you that. Mom did, I said. Quarters for laundry, but it'll calm you better than a speech. Around 1 o'clock, the senator's advance team walked the path with us. They wore suits that tried to be casual and smiles that didn't. We want this to feel like a picnic. The aide said, eyes on the rope. Jobs, not drama. Jobs, like chairs. Pearl asked, hauling 2 more to the edge for a grandma with a cane. The aide didn't hear the joke. Haskell did. He smiled without using his mouth. I spotted my father sidling closer again, telling anyone who didn't ask that optics are fine until somebody needs a pair of hands. He nodded at my notebook. I never saw a list. Pick up a man, he said loud enough to travel. Men pick up men. Lists keep you from dropping them, I said, and turned back to the specialist, because some arguments arrive, looking like debates, but are just old feelings that don't know what else to wear. We carved out a quiet square behind the grandstand where I could say my piece to the team without the crowd trying to borrow it. Here's the whole thing, I said, simple as I could. We send the same message with our faces as we do with our mouths. We don't brag about calm, we show it. If Major calls freeze, we buy 10 seconds without hurting anybody. That's a win in public. That's what the county remembers. Copy, the specialist said, thumb on his quarter. Haskell checked the adapters again because again is holy, and I loved him for it. By 2, the rumor about the old mill hiring had turned into 3 different truths, and somebody started a chant that got the vowels wrong, but the intent right. A teenage girl in a borrowed megaphone tried to out-sing the speakers and blushed when her voice cracked. A man in an old army field jacket stood with his arms folded, eyes soft. He caught my eye and nodded once like a handshake from where he stood. Pearl came back with fresh ice. I put the lemonade in the shade, she announced to nobody in particular. We will not add sugar to heat today. Commander Ruth clapped once. Sheriff Decker tucked his pencil behind his ear and looked up the road. The radio said the motorcade had turned off the highway. The whole fair inhaled. I did the check I always do when I'm about to touch something that can embarrass you in front of your neighbors. Rag in pocket notebook, open quarter in the kid's palm. Adapter type mag, seated for blank's muzzle. Pointed where forgiveness lives. I told my face to say fine, and meant it. Dad drifted to the rope line like a man who wanted to be the spine of a scene. He planted his boots, set his jaw, and put his hands on his hips the way foremen do when they're about to decide something out loud. "Don't let her near it," he told a banker again, like he was praying into a wall. The banker looked past him at me and shrugged an apology the size of a breath. Sirens ahead, soft more announcement than warning. The aide's smile got tighter. Sheriff Decker rolled his shoulders. Haskell checked his watch, then me. "Same plan as the whiteboard," he said. "Same plan as every plan I said." The motorcade nosed in slow, like a boat at a dock. Signs lifted a chant. Found its rhythm, the rope bowed just enough to make every deputy step into his square of tape. That wire-tight feel in the air pulled one more notch. The specialist brought the rifle high to execute the thing he'd practiced until it lived in muscle. The crowd pressed. A shoulder bumped. The ejection port flashed brass spent vertical, the wrong kind of flag. I saw the stovepipe. So did he. So did my father. And because the day had a sense of humor, Dad chose that second to raise his voice over all the others. Dad's voice went up like a flare. "She'll only make it worse." It cut through chant and speaker squeal and the skitter of plastic signs against the rope. The specialist froze, that one extra heartbeat a young man's hands sometimes need. The M16A4 hung high, blank adapter snug, a spent casing stuck straight up in the ejection port like a little brass chimney stovepipe textbook, and unhelpful. "Lawson," Major Haskell said, not loud, not soft. Just the kind of voice people obey because it sounds like a plan. I stepped into the space crowds, leave around trouble. The air smelled like kettle corn and hot plastic and a little powder from whatever blanks had been run earlier. I didn't look for Dad. I looked for Sky Corner's hands. Deputies had already stepped to the tape squares I'd labeled bullhorn and water. Sheriff Decker curled his fingers on the bullhorn handle and waited for the sound we'd agreed on. "Magazine," I said to the specialist, palm up. He slapped it into my hand like he was glad to have one decision done. "Bolt lock." He pulled, held. I could feel the crowd's breath on my shoulders, the way a room leans in on a secret. The spent case winked brass in the noon light. I thumbed it free. It was hot enough to ask for respect, not hot enough to hurt. "Rack," I said. He racked. I tapped the forward assist with the heel of my hand until it felt right. I checked the blank adapter with a twist tight, then handed the mag back, blue stripes showing. "Seat it. Breathe." Dad said something that got lost in the sudden hush that falls when people sense a corner being turned. I didn't chase his words. I set my face to fine. Haskell's jaw moved once like a man thinking through weather. He didn't need bravado. He needed a second. He took it. Then he gave the smallest nod, and I said the line the plan had given me. "Freeze the line." Sheriff Decker lifted the bullhorn, ready to be chorus. I brought the rifle high, safe sky backdrop, empty of people, elbows in, so the muzzle couldn't wander, and pressed the trigger. Bang! It slapped the grandstand and came back. The sound was not war. It was a gavel. Birds lifted from the light poles. A woman's sign stopped shaking. The chant cracked in half and fell silent. The crowd held the breath it had been wasting and rediscovered the idea of shoulders down. "Hold," Decker said into the bullhorn, steady and plain. "Breathe. Back away to the tape. Not a bark. A request you obey because relief feels good." Pearl was already passing waters 2 at a time like communion cups. A deputy kneeled to scoop up a kid who'd crawled under the rope to look at the shiny adapter and dusted his knees like he'd just slid into second. The specialist's eyes were wide as coins. He wasn't scared. He was new. "Good," I said. "You did your part. Remember how your hands felt. That's the part you can keep." He nodded hard enough to move his cover and put his quarter back in his pocket like a promise he'd earned. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dad's face lose its color in stages like the sun had gone behind a cloud only for him. The red rag hung from his fist like a flag that wanted to be put away. Haskell stepped forward, hands still in his pockets, like he knew better than to make fists when peace was possible. He didn't steal the mic from the senator's staffer. He waited until the aide with the too small smile offered it. Then he didn't speak into the mic at all. He turned and addressed the deputies first. "That's it," he said. "Reset the line. If someone needs a chair, find a chair." Then he faced the crowd and let the mic catch his voice. "Folks, thanks. We had a hiccup. We fixed it. We'll keep this safe. If you need water, raise your hand. If you need to leave the west gates clear." He gestured me forward before I could back away. "Credit to Chief Lawson," he said. "Not shouting, not dramatic. She teaches our armorer course and runs safety for events like this. If your heart just slowed down, she helped." People don't clap all at once in a moment like that. They try it like a shoe that might not fit and then realize it does. The VFW Commander Ruth started with one sharp clap and then another, as if she were nailing something true to a post. PTA moms followed. A man in a mill hoodie raised his hand like he was in church and said, "Thank you, ma'am," and meant it the way men mean clean water. Senator Whitaker had the sense to keep her remarks small. She took the mic, nodded at the sheriff, then at me, then at the young specialist, like she knew a kid's hands matter in a story. "We're all neighbors today," she said. "Thank you to the guard and the sheriff for a safe reset. I'll keep my comments short because we can all smell the pies." People laughed the kind of laugh that turns a room back into a room. Out by the rope, Dad bent like he was tying a shoe that didn't need tying. Commander Ruth sidled up and offered him a styrofoam cup. He took it like a man who'd rather hold something than meet a fact head-on. He said paper bullets to nobody in particular, and the farmer he'd been lecturing earlier said sound if it buys you a minute, and Dad didn't argue because the minute had just been spendable, and he knew it. Haskell handed the mic back to the aide, then turned to me with a face that said, "Nice work," without making a party of it. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said, and found I meant it. My hands were steady. The peppermint in the red rag cut through the powder smell, and for a second I saw my mother at the kitchen table, labeling a coffee tin range log in her tidy slanted hand. The specialist cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, "about the quarter." "Keep using it," I said. "One day you won't need it. Keep doing it anyway." "Copy," he said, and the word sat better in his mouth than it had earlier. Sheriff Decker did a slow lap along the tape, checking faces the way a mechanic checks belts. He stopped by Dad and said mild as weather goes smoother when the right person does the right job. Dad stared at his coffee like it might offer a counter-argument and came up empty. When the senator finally spoke her piece, "Jobs, Mills, Roads," you could feel the crowd had traded adrenaline for attention. It's easier to listen when your shoulders remember they're allowed to rest. A protest chant tried to restart and died of embarrassment. Pearl refilled the cooler and told a boy with a cowlick to bring a cup to his grandpa first, because dignity is a habit too. After the remarks, photos. Not for show, people want proof they stood near the day and it didn't bite them. The aide tried to pull me into a shot with the senator and a flag. I waved it off until the senator tugged me by the sleeve like a neighbor, insisting you take a casserole at the funeral lunch. "Just one," she said quietly. "For the county archives." That felt less like bragging and more like filing. We did one picture, no teeth. Just faces that said we had done the steps in order and the day had rewarded us by being small again. I drifted back toward the weapons check station. Haskell checked the adapter for the 20th time because again, still matters after a win. "You didn't make theater out of it," he said. "You showed work." "Mom said work shows itself," I said. "Smart woman," he said. At the edge of the rope, Dad finally looked at me. His jaw had the set it gets when he's trying to hold in something that thinks it's a word. He didn't come over. He didn't have to. We both knew the sound the county had heard. We both knew it was enough. On the way to the truck for a fresh pack of tape, I passed the mill guy again. "Hand steady," he said. "Notebook helps," I said. He grinned. "Wish I'd had one when my boy was little." I smiled back and kept moving. The day had found its shape. We held the lanes, The pies sold out. The bullhorn sang, "Take me out to the ball game," when voices got spicy and people laughed at themselves before they could get mad. We reset without injury and left the place better than we found it. That's a win where I'm from. Later, as the sun slid behind the fairground lights and the grandstand emptied in a slow pour, I saw Dad wipe his face with a red rag like a man cleaning a tool he hadn't realized he owned. He looked smaller and truer in the long light, not beaten, just finally standing next to a fact that didn't need his permission. I didn't chase him. The county had already heard what I needed it to hear. By evening, the fairground clip had done a lap around Hocking County. Somebody's nephew posted 30 seconds the stovepipe. My hands the blank. The crowd settling captioned, "She made the whole place breathe." In the Lancaster chit-chat group, strangers argued about whether it was real ammo, and 3 different uncles explained blanks like they'd invented them. I stayed off the thread. You don't fix engines in the comments. Sunday morning, I took my booth at Bob Evans. Phyllis poured coffee strong enough to stand a spoon. A couple at the next table nodded the way folks do when they've decided you deserve a nod. "Saw that video," the man said. "Sounded like a gavel." I said it sounded like a plan catching up with itself. After church, Commander Ruth cornered me by the VFW coffee pot. "County's talking about a school safety upkeep grant," she said low. "Tiny pot of money. The state wants training receipts, logs, checklists, the boring good stuff. You should throw your hat." "Hat or notebook," I said. She smiled. "Both." On Monday, the courthouse bulletin board sprouted a flyer. Request for proposals. Small arms safety and upkeep training for schools and first responders. Sheriff Decker put his pencil behind his ear and said, "We're not trying to make soldiers out of anybody. We're trying to keep kids' deputies and equipment from getting hurt by ignorance." Dad read the flyer at the counter of Lawson Auto and Locksmith like it was an insult. "They'll hand it to me." He told a farmer getting keys cut. "Been here since '79. He glanced at me. "You can assist." Assist sounds like do the work while someone else signs it, I said. He lifted the red rag. "It sounds like family." "It sounds like old habit," I said, and we both went quiet, because truth makes rooms echo. By lunch, the shop phone had rung enough to sound like a memory. Some callers wanted to say nice things. Some wanted to tell me what I'd done wrong in a video they watched on mute. Dad took the ones that let him say optics and men up front. I made a list of questions people actually had. Where do blanks live? Who keeps a log? What's the plan when adrenaline shows up dressed as anger? I built a thin binder on Mom's oak table because thin binds better in a county meeting cover sheet that read, "What we teach, what we sign, who picks up the phone." A 2-page curriculum for school resource officers and custodial staff, blue gun safe handling chamber flags, storage checks, a 1-pager on blanks protocol at public events, armory log templates with lines big enough for real signatures, a repair cycle chart for small arms that boiled down to clean lube document repeat, and a schedule for community safety nights. No politics, just rules kids can memorize and grandparents can nod at. I wrote my cell at the bottom of every page because people trust numbers more than logos. Printing meant Brown's the shop that smells like ink and Friday. Mr. Brown slid on his glasses and turned the pages with careful fingers. "You did the homework," he said, same as when I was 10, and ordered business cards for a pretend dog walking company. "Machines and meetings like homework," I said. He stacked copies, added a rubber band. "You want tabs?" he asked. "Tabs win meetings," I said. He grinned and added tabs. I dropped a packet at the sheriff's office for Decker. He whistled at the escalation tree with names not titles, and another at the superintendents because buses and gyms end up part of these stories whether we plan for them or not. I left an extra at the VFW, where Ruth tucked it next to the flag rack like it belonged. At supper, I drove past Dad's shop. Bay doors were open. 2 old-timers nursed coffees that had given up. Dad held court. "Showboating," he said to the air. That's what that was. I was handling optics. The old-timers didn't nod. Men that age nod when something's earned. I walked in and set a copy of my binder on the counter. "Here's what I'm submitting," I said. He tapped it like he was checking a melon for ripeness. "You'll scare people with all this paper," he said. "I'll let them sleep," I said. "Logs are how a county remembers what we promised when we're tired." He thumbed the red rag. You could put Lawson Auto on the cover, he said soft. Let folks know it's us. It is us, I said. Me and this town. If you want in, come teach on Monday nights. His mouth tightened. I don't teach from binders. You taught me with one, I said, and watched the muscle in his jaw remember my mother's neat lists. He didn't answer. Men like my father can ignore a fact until it brings a chair. Word of community safety night spread faster than I'd planned. PTA moms wanted a slot. The bus garage wanted a dry run of the Don't Guess Tired talk. The high school shop teacher offered his room if the gym was taken. No politics, I told each caller. Blue guns, 3 rules, a talk about why logs matter. If your kid can recite the rules, they get a sticker that says, ask before you touch. The sticker came from Brown's too. He made it with a little star no one asked for and everyone liked. We held the first night in the gym floor polished to a shine, bleachers smelling like varnish and teenage history. I set the rules on a whiteboard. Keep it pointed safe. Finger off the trigger. Check the chamber every single time. We used chamber flags and blue guns and a lot of repetition. Sheriff Decker poured coffee that tasted like apologies. Pearl passed cookies that tasted like forgiveness. A grandmother raised her hand and said, I don't like guns. I nodded. You don't have to, I said. You only have to like your grandson's fingers. She laughed in spite of herself and took a blue gun to learn how to say no with authority. After class, a bus driver named Claire asked, does the log really matter if it's just me and a closet? Logs matter most when it's just you and a closet, I said. They're what you point to when someone forgets you did the right thing. She took 2 copies of the template and a handful of stickers. I'll put a sheet protector on the inside of the door, she said, so it doesn't get coffee on it. Smart, I said. Coffee ruins everything except mornings. Back at the shop, Dad leafed my binder again when he thought I wasn't looking. He stopped at the schedule where Route 33 Community Safety Night was written in big letters, and my cell sat at the bottom. He set the rag on the page, almost gentle. I suppose the county board will eat that up, he muttered. They'll eat what lets them sleep, I said. You coming to the meeting? I might, he said. Somebody has to speak plain. I'll bring a meter, I said out of habit, then realized I was talking to the wrong story. He didn't smile, but something softened the way metal does when you heat it slow. The week stretched. The clip's comments cooled. People told me quietly at Kroger that they liked seeing a plan win. One man stopped me by the frozen green beans to say, my wife watched that video twice and said your hands looked like they'd seen dishes and engines. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment until he added, that's who I trust. I said thank you and meant it. The county administration building posted, agenda, Thursday, 6 p.m. grant award. I packed my binder and a handful of ask, before you touch stickers, because stickers change rooms. I didn't rehearse a speech. I rehearsed steps. Who speaks first? Who hands the board a copy? Where I stand? Where I breathe? Before I left, I stopped by Dad's shop. Late afternoon light made the dust look honest. He had the radio on low and a key blank clamped file singing. I put a second binder on the counter. In case you change your mind, I said. You can stand next to me and say the part about 1979. Folks like a through line. He kept filing until a small brass curl fell free. Then he set the key down and looked at me like he was trying on a new kind of silence. You always write it down, he said. It keeps me from lying to myself, I said. He reached for the red rag, then didn't. I might be late, he said, but I'll come. That's enough, I said. I drove to the admin building with the gym smell still on my sleeves, varnish, sugar cookies, coffee. Outside the doors, the VFW commander stood with Pearl and Sheriff Decker, 3 people who make rooms smaller when they should be and larger when they need to be. Ruth handed me a styrofoam cup of something hot and bad. To boring victories, she said. Those are the best kind, I said. Inside the board shuffled papers and the county seal looked older than all our arguments. I took a seat where I could see Dad if he came. I set my binder on my knees and my stickers on top. I told my face to say fine. It listened. The county administration building always smells like wax and burnt coffee, the kind of place where decisions go to put on church clothes. I got there 10 minutes early because early calms my hands. The linoleum was buffed to a shine that threatened old knees. Sheriff Decker stood by the water fountain with Commander Ruth and Pearl, the three of them like bookends for the county. Ruth pressed a styrofoam cup into my hand. "To boring victories," she said. The coffee tasted like pencils. I drank it anyway. I took a seat 2 rows back end of the aisle where I could see the door and the dais. My thin binder sat on my knees with the "Ask Before You Touch" stickers on top like a garnish for courage. One by one, the room filled with people who knew each other well enough to keep secrets and still tell the truth. Bus drivers in windbreakers, a school custodian with hands like shovels, 2 EMTs, a pair of PTA moms who could organize a parade with index cards, and a handful of veterans who prefer nods to speeches. Dad came in late manila folder under his arm, red rag in his back pocket like a tail. He kept his chin up and his eyes low, the way a man does when he isn't sure which way the wind is blowing, but wants folks to think he is. He took a seat along the wall, nodded to no one in particular, and stared at the county seal like it owed him money. The chairwoman called the meeting to order, voice plain as road salt. Pledge roll call, minutes accepted. Then, Item 5 award of the School Safety Upkeep and First Responder Small Arms Training Grant. You could feel the room lean in without moving. First speaker, the clerk said, Mr. Earl Lawson, Auto and Locksmith. Dad rose, smoothed the manila folder as if it were hair, and walked to the podium. He didn't need the mic. His voice knows rooms. "Evening," he said. "I'm Earl Lawson. Been fixing things in Hocking County since 1979. Keys, engines, whatever shows up. Folks know me. I answer the phone when it rings. Don't need a committee to tell me what the right thing looks like." He paused to let familiarity do its work. It did some. "I propose to oversee this training under Lawson, Auto and Locksmith," he said. "We'll keep it simple. Safety is common sense. We'll teach it that way." The chairwoman looked to the clerk, who read from a sheet that didn't smile. "Current training plan on file, none. Written curriculum, none. Armory log templates, none. Documentation of blanks protocols at public events, none. OSHA refresher date pending. References, 3 handwritten letters, 1 unsigned." Dad lifted his chin like he could shorten the distance between pending and done by posture alone. "I've been here," he said. "The county knows where to find me." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," the chairwoman said, gentle enough. Next, Route 33, Community Safety. I stood, carried my binder and a small stack of tabbed copies, Brown's best work, and set them on the ledge for the board, the clerk, and the reporter, who still brings a paper notebook to meetings because computers make him feel rude. I brought the mic down a hair because being heard is easier when you aren't reaching. "Evening," I said. "I'm Ray Lawson, Army National Guard Small Arms Repairer and Safety Instructor. What we're proposing is 3 things you can check on paper and see in a gym." I kept it stripped. 1, a written curriculum for school resource officers, custodians, and first responders. Blue gun handling, chamber flags, storage checks. 2, armory logs and checklists, with names, not titles, and dates, big enough to sign without squinting. 3, community safety nights, no politics, where kids and grandparents learn the same 3 rules the same way every time. I slid the tabs forward, 1 finger on each. This is the schedule. This is who picks up the phone at 2 in the morning if something is wrong, and who answers at 2:05 if 2 a.m. didn't work. This is where blanks live at public events and who signs for them. This is how we put rifles away when we're tired. A bus driver. I recognized Claire, Route 12, lifted a hand. The chairwoman nodded. "If my closet's just me," Claire said, "does anybody check I did it right?" "Yes," I said. "Logs matter most when it's just you and a closet. The sheriff spot checks twice a year. You keep your sheet protector inside the door. You get credit for quiet." A PTA mom asked if kids would touch the blue guns. "They'll point them in a safe direction, check the chamber, and say the rules out loud," I said. "Then they get a sticker that tells them to ask before they touch anything real. It's boring on purpose." A man in a mill hoodie stood and cleared his throat. "Is this about making soldiers?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's about making mistakes smaller. We're teaching how not to guess." The chairwoman looked down the dais pencil, tapping once. "Any other speakers?" she asked. A uniform stepped in the doorway. silver star at the shoulder hat under his arm. He waited like he'd been taught manners by a woman with a wooden spoon. The chair recognized him. "Madam Chair," he said. "Brigadier General Cole State, Adjutant General. I'm not here to back a bidder. The guard belongs to Ohio. I came because I was told the event last Saturday was handled with calm and logs, not luck and noise." He kept it short, which is how, he'd been to a few of these. Public safety is paperwork, and people who stick to it. I watched a county watch a young woman make a plan visible. Competence has receipts. That's all I've got. He sat. Sheriff Decker said amen under his breath, but the mic didn't catch it. Public comment opened. Commander Ruth rose slow, like a flag going up. "Ruth McCready VFW," she said. "I don't love meetings, but I love quiet. This makes more of it." Claire lifted a hand again. "I just want the kids home safe," she said. "Give it to the one who says who answers at 2 a.m. Dad stood once more, manila folder to his chest. "I've been doing safety since before some of you were born," he said. "We didn't need stickers or tabs. We used common sense." The chairwoman didn't scold. "Common sense is what we call the list after we write it down," she said. A few people smiled into their hands. Questions closed. The chairwoman glanced at her board, then at the stack of tabbed binders, then at Dad's manila folder that had never opened. The soda machine hummed like an old hymn. "Ready for a vote?" she asked. Roll call went slow enough to count heartbeats. Names and I one by one, with one abstain from a man who doesn't like to be first or last. "Award the grant to Route 33 Community Safety," the chairwoman said. Motion carries. For a second, nobody clapped. Then Commander Ruth did one sharp, and the room followed. Not a parade, something steadier. Claire wiped at her eye like dust had shown up inside. Pearl handed me a cup of water the second I turned around because she understands bodies the way I understand bolts. The aide from the senator's office tried to move him for a photo and then thought better of it when Sheriff Decker shook his head like not tonight. The reporter scribbled, then looked up. "Spell your last name," he asked. "Lawson," I said, like my father's. I turned to where Dad sat and found him still on the metal chair manila folder, unopened in his lap, red rag pinched in his fist until it left a line across his knuckles. He didn't stomp out or make a speech. He stared at the county seal a good long while, then stood and let the red rag fall into his back pocket like a flag being folded without ceremony. On the way past me, he paused like he'd lost a word and found another. His jaw worked once. "You won," he said. "The county did," I said, because truth doesn't mind sounding corny if it fits. He didn't answer. He just nodded. Once, a small nod, the kind a man gives to a measurement he can't argue with, and walked toward the door, where the wax made the floor look slicker than it was. Sheriff Decker clapped my shoulder. "You gave them something to sign," he said. "That's how you sleep." General Cole shook my hand without making a ceremony. "Bring those blue guns to the high school," he said. "Kids believe what they can hold." "I'll bring extra chamber flags," I said. Pearl squeezed my elbow, then pushed a cookie into my palm the way a grandmother forgives a long day. "Go home," she said. "You look like a person who thinks better after a sandwich." Outside, the air had that clean after-rain feel, even though it hadn't rained. The courthouse light buzzed. Somewhere down the block, a truck idled low and patient. I stood on the steps and breathed the kind of breath you forget to take when you've been holding the room steady for an hour. Across the lot, under a street lamp, Dad stopped and stared into the middle distance, like a man listening for a tool he dropped years ago. He turned as if to come back, then didn't. The red rag lit up once in the sodium light and disappeared into shadow. I didn't chase him. The vote was its own sentence. The county had spoken out loud. Tomorrow, I'd teach a room full of kids to say 3 rules in one voice and mean them. Tonight, I'd go home and put my mother's checklist somewhere it could see me. The morning after the vote, I found a small cardboard box on my bench at the old oak table, the one my mother used to turn into a filing cabinet when life got loud. No note. The return address was my father's handwriting, the stubborn print he uses when he wants a thing to look official. Inside sat a key on a tagged ring, a roll of label tape, and my mother's range log, the thin green booklet she kept when our church youth group used blue guns one summer in the gym. Tucked beside it was a single sheet, sun-faded at the edges, written in her tidy, slanted hand. Checklist, public events. 1. Say the rules out loud. 2. Safe direction first, last always. 3. Blanks live with locks. 2 names, 2 keys. 4. If you're tired, write it down, then stop. 5. Gum helps. Pride doesn't. I sat with it a while. Paper can be a voice. Hers was. I drove to the new room we borrowed at the high school and taped the checklist to the cinder block wall by the coffee urn. I put the key on a nail above it and the roll of labels on the table next to the chamber flags. Sheriff Decker came in with a box of styrofoam cups and whistled when he read the list. Your mama knew how to keep a room calm, he said. Gum helps, I said, pulling a pack from my pocket. The peppermint made the air friendly. Our first community safety night after the vote felt like a reunion without name tags. Grandparents in denim jackets, bus drivers, gym teachers, and a nurse who'd already worked 12 hours. Commander Ruth poured coffee that tasted like a pencil and forgiveness. Pearl passed a cookie plate that made cynics smile. I opened with the same 3 rules written in block letters kids could read from the cheap seats. We handed out blue guns and orange chamber flags. People who said they didn't like guns learned how to say no with their hands in a way that made me trust hallways again. A grandpa in a Vietnam cap raised his hand and said, I'm here because my daughter asked me to walk my grandson through this. I don't want heroes. I want him to keep his fingers. I nodded and handed him a sticker that read, Ask before you touch. We practiced the script that keeps mistakes small. The gym echoed with one phrase, 100 voices. Safe direction. It sounded like a hymn after the 3rd verse, ordinary and true. During a break, a custodian named Lou asked where to hang his log. Inside the closet door, I said, Sheet protector. Big pen. If someone questions you later, you don't tell a story. You point. He smiled like a man who'd been offered a lighter load. The next week, Sheriff Decker texted at 6:12 a.m. Claire's closet log saved an argument. She had dates. Board moved on. I could see the scene, the meeting that didn't turn ugly because paper did its job. Not a headline. A quiet win that lets people go home on time. I showed the text to Pearl. She nodded like I told her rain had returned to July. Dad didn't come to that first night. He showed up the next Tuesday with his red rag folded like a flag and a face that looked like he'd slept 2 hours out of 3. He stood by the door and watched without commenting, which is his version of applause. After the last kid set a blue gun down and a grandmother asked for an extra sticker for a stubborn niece, he walked over and set a silver wrench on the table, polished old craftsman the size he always kept nearest. For your shadow box? He said, then cleared his throat. And that key I sent, it opens the storage I rented after your mother got sick. There's more of her lists. Some I didn't like at the time. His mouth tried a smile and found honesty instead. I don't have to like a thing to know it works. We walked the hallway where state tournament banners hang like proof time behaves. He thumbed the red rag. You going to keep the name Lawson anywhere, he asked. Not an accusation. A hope he didn't want to feed. I'm thinking a small plaque by the coffee, I said. Your shop sign from '79, if you'll let me borrow it for a photo. Mom's checklist. The wrench. Maybe a copy of the county vote, just the line with the motion carried. Not because it's a trophy, because it's a receipt. He looked down at the wrench like it had told a joke he missed. Receipts, he said. You always did like proof. Proof lets you sleep, I said. He nodded slow, like a jack settling onto a frame. I was wrong to say you'd make it worse, he said, not looking at me. I heard myself on that video. Sounded like an old door that won't close. I don't like that sound. We fixed it, I said. Not all the way, he said, but enough for today. We hung the shadow box the following Saturday in the corner where folks drift toward the coffee first. Brown from the print shop came by with a brass plate he'd engraved without charging me. Respect is the bill you owe when someone shows up and does the work. He said it at the bottom of the glass with a smile that didn't need words. The program found its rhythm. Mondays felt like a church basement, and a motor pool had wanted a kid. Seniors brought grandkids. A bus driver showed a boy how to say no to curiosity. A young deputy practiced breathing with a quarter in his offhand and laughed at himself when he forgot and then remembered. We added a table at the back with free gun locks, courtesy of a hardware store owner who says he'll never vote for my senator and doesn't care because safety isn't partisan. Sticker sheets disappeared into pockets and onto lunchboxes. The gym slowly turned into a place where fear looked smaller. I found time for my father that wasn't about winning. We rekeyed a church office and tuned a sticky hinge. He taught a kid how to file a sharp edge off a metal bracket without losing a finger, and he didn't mention back when men were men. He left the rag in his pocket and let the kid be good at being careful. On the way out, he tapped the plaque with one knuckle. "Your mother would have liked that line," he said. "She wrote it with her life," I said. We never staged a second spectacle. Revenge didn't come with sirens. It came with calendars. The county's emails got shorter. The arguments in meetings found their size and stayed there. When a closet log kept a rumor from becoming a fight, no one sent a clip to the chit-chat group. They just went home. I count that as a victory taller than applause. Once late, after we'd stacked cones and boxed the flags, Dad lingered by the checklist. "You always were the kid who read the back of the cereal box," he said, half teasing. "Turns out the back has the instructions." "Turns out," I said. He put the red rag on the table and smoothed it flat with his palm. "I can help with locks at the school," he said. "Not for credit, just so doors behave." "That'd be good," I said, and meant more than the words. We never spoke about 97 again. We didn't need to. The plaque did the talking, and when folks in town wanted to know why the gym felt different, they pointed at the shadow box and the schedule and the pile of chamber flags like a recipe card taped to a cabinet. If you're listening to this and the shape of it feels familiar, if you've got someone in your life who learned to respect work after a crowd heard the truth, share this with them. If you've got a room that needs calming, borrow our rules and our stickers and our habit of writing it down. And if you want more plain stories where the fix is real, the win is public, and the aftertaste is steady, subscribe and pull up a chair. We'll keep the coffee hot, the lists short, and the peppermint handy.